All right, we're COMP397, and it's week 2, I guess lesson 2, part 1. And last week we kind of did an intro, a little bit of stuff to make you crazy, right? This week we're going to go a little bit slower, and we're going to talk about we're going to start talking about JavaScript fundamentals. I've kind of put a couple things up on eCentennial. Let's take a look. If you guys can go on your eCentennial, please, just so we know what we're talking about here. Yeah. Okay, so if I go to the course for a second, which is this one. So I've got a YouTube playlist. I don't know if you've seen that already. So if you see the playlist, that'll take you to the playlist. If I go there, there's a few videos there already for part 1, 2, and 3, right? Again, videos are there really for your use in terms of like as an additional resource. You don't have to watch them. I don't expect you to or whatever, but they're there just in case, we talk about something and you don't know how to do it, or if I go too fast, because sometimes I'll go blazing, right? It's just going to happen. Or you don't want to do this. Like I said, keep looking at computer and look up, and it's hard for you to follow because you're trying to type along as I'm doing, and then it's hard, right? So that's, we do tutorials, but I want to capture the tutorial and put it here on YouTube. So that's one of the things. That's why I do the playlist. Not because I don't want you to come to class, right? It's because I want you to have additional resources. Okay, that's one. The other thing is that if I go back, there's also, I put up this JavaScript fundamentals, which I'm going to kind of hack into over the next, a couple of classes. I want to talk about a little bit today. Actually, however much I can get through today. I might skip through some stuff or whatever, but then I want to kind of get into that, right? To talk about JavaScript fundamentals, and I'll probably do that in the second video. This first video, what I really want to do is talk about some of these links I put up here for you. And if you notice, there's a bunch of links I put up here in terms of to help you, just in case you need some of this stuff. Some of it is good stuff for web design, right? Some of it's really good stuff for game design, and I kind of have those two links up here. So let's start talking about those two things right now. So the first one, if I go into the web design tools, some of them that are really, really cool, which I can point out to you, that I would look at. There's some really good JavaScript resources. If you wanted to learn JavaScript, I kind of put it up here as well. There's one that's called JavaScript Best Practices, if you want to follow along on your own. It's actually, it's a really good way of looking at JavaScript. Because a lot of the stuff we're going to be doing here in the course, even though there isn't a JavaScript course per se right now, there will be in the fall a dedicated JavaScript course at Centennial. But right now there isn't. So I've got to kind of inject a little bit of JavaScript for you because you need it in order for you to do the thing we're going to be doing, right? So that's kind of one of the links. I love when that happens. And then, of course, there is site planning. Sometimes, we want to do a site plan, or you want to do some kind of, see if I can remember my password. Oh yeah, here we are. Bubble.us, if I can, no, of course that's not the right password. But anyways, bubble.us, right, if I was going to do it, it looks like this. So let's say I want to start planning, and one of the assignments I'm going to get you to do is where you actually plan your site. So as an example, or you plan your game. So you start here, and this is maybe the start screen, as an example. And then what we want to do is form up the kind of the game loop. Let me see if I can move this around. So here's my start screen, and then this one would be our menu. And from the menu, you're going to have kind of different states, right? Well, that's not the one I wanted, of course. So you want to do things like your, game state. We're going to talk about states, different states. Another one would be your instruction state, as an example. And then, of course, the other one would be, one more after this, would be kind of a game over state. But the game over state you can only get to from your game state, right? Because that makes sense, game over state. Why am I doing this? Because I want to show you, we want to talk about flow, right? So you've got your game state, you've got your instruction state. Is there a link between these two things? Absolutely, you know, and you can do things like draw out your path, if you will, as much as you like. And there's some tools. Bubble.us is a free online tool you can use to create a sitemap, if you will, or some kind of diagram, if you will. You can also do that with any kind of flow charting software. And we're going to need to do that sometimes when it comes to describing the way our game flows. So bubble.us. We're also eventually going to talk about things like fonts and colors. And if you ever do any kind of web design in the future, there are Adobe, of course, has color.adobe.com, which used to be called Adobe Cooler. And if you wanted to set up some site colors, like let's say, for example, you wanted to talk some kind of site colors that make sense, once you decide on the site colors, Adobe Cooler comes up with some really complementary colors for your site. So if you want to make a game, even though we're not doing traditional web design here in the course, we won't be doing that much. But if you ever want to set things up and talk about site colors and so on, especially to make your game a little bit more interesting to look at as opposed to like a white screen in the background, right? Then you may want to look at something like this. So that's why I include some of these basic web tools here as well. One of the other things is if you want to talk about wireframing, I'm not going to go there for a second, there's another place called Mockups. Mockups with a Q, right? And what Mockups does is very similar to what we did where I talked about flow. This actually, you can draw out the mockup itself. So you can drag and drop stuff from the side, right, to kind of describe your screen a little bit. And if you notice, there's some basic controls that you can drag and drop. So if I don't want this, as an example, I can get rid of it, right, because it's just a control. So I can delete anything I don't want. Let me just delete everything. There we go. And then I'll show you what it looks like when I start building it out again, right? So let's say, for example, I want a, now this doesn't matter if whether you, again, classic web design, traditional web design, or if you're building games. Sometimes what we need to do is start drawing stuff out, right? Because we want to say, well, this is what my screen is going to look like. And inside my screen, well, I want to put my avatar, whatever, my game, and you can start drawing stuff out here, almost creating your own wireframes. And I'm going to require you to do that for one of your first assignments, where wireframing is important. You have to know how to do that. Well, there's some tools here to assist you, right? So again, I want to, even if it's something like this, here's my block, this is my avatar, right? And my avatar moves across the screen, right? Here's my avatar down here, and maybe there's some other clouds up here or whatever. We're going to do a game like that. And you can, I think there's even a freeform drawing, the ability for you to freeform draw as well. But the idea is you do your wireframes, and this is called mockups. If you're doing traditional web design, obviously you're going to pull on some additional controls. We're not doing that, so you wouldn't. But you can create your wireframes, and from your wireframes, this is part of your design or your concept. Right now, if you don't know game design, and again, this is kind of an optional course for many of you, right? So maybe you don't know the basics of game design, but one of the things we're going to try and do here is incorporate something called the game design document, because we need to understand from a planning perspective what we're doing, right? So it's not just like we're not just going to do. We're going to plan first and then try and execute that plan, right? That's really, really important. And so, by the way, Albert, have you passed out the... It's all circulated. Please sign in, please. It's important that you do that. And so that's why another little tool that I've kind of put up there in the link. As well, sometimes you want to do some fancy stuff with CSS, and you know what? You forgot how to do it because you've been on COMP for so long, and you don't even know where your files are, right? So you can do something like this. If I want to create something like a transition or a gradient, I forgot how to do gradients, as an example. Well, and I want to do kind of a blue background gradient. Well, look, all the CSS is right here, right? So you can choose your background. You can assign your colors, as an example. And you can create your gradient the way you like it, and so on. And once you've done that, it'll generate it for you. You can import from CSS, or you can generate it to CSS, import from image, and you can create your own gradients. Or you can pick some presets. If you like some really good presets that are here, you can pick something, and then instead of, again, your background being so plain and boring, you can do your CSS gradient from here, right? So some other tools. So these are basic, the stuff I've shown you is like basic stuff that you would know or you would need to know if you were doing basic web design. But the really interesting stuff is your game stuff. And one of them is you want to make sounds in your game. And we're going to do that a little bit today. We're going to practice doing another template, if you will. And I want to make sounds. I want to do like, I want to create, let's say, a pickup sound, like a coin pickup. So, you know, and I want to make a unique sound, right? I don't want to make it so that like I steal the sound from online, right? Or maybe some kind of laser shot. Well, this site here, www.bfxr.net, allows you to generate free sounds as opposed to you know, you stealing it from the internet and so on, right? I would want to try and do that as much as possible. You can also download the standalone version for both Windows and Mac if you're interested. And again, it just generates different kinds of sounds like a hit, right? Or a power up. And again, you can make them different. You can actually program your own. If you notice, you can play with the delay time, play it again, right? The frequency and so on. And so on, so that way you get a little bit of variation, right? So bfxr.net for sound generation. And again, you can export to WAV, or then later on you can end up converting to MP3. So that's one of the things you can try out. Another thing that we want to try and do is there's some really interesting forums from HTML5 gamedevelopment.com, right? This site, what they do is they talk about different kinds of games. And just as a segue here, when I talk about games, remember that all the work that you do in this class is your own, right? I'm very, very good at finding cheaters. So please don't cheat and copy from some site or think that I won't be able to catch you. I'm very, very good at it. And you know why? Not because I want to, because I can see your patterns. I look at your patterns and I can tell, this is John's work. It's not, oh, it's okay. Then I look at the next, you know, the next assignment, and all of a sudden John, right, he's better than I am, right? There's a difference, right? I can tell the patterns. So that's one of the things I look at as well. But it's, for the other reason is, I mean, you know, why are you doing this course? If you're doing it for simply for just marks, I mean, you know, I don't think that's a great motivation. Not the only motivation anyway. But please don't try that. There's a lot of good examples here for games, and I think the good thing that we can use this site for is to look at other people's work and try and understand what they're doing. They also talk about different game engines. Even though I really highlight Create.js, there's some other ones in here as well, like Quintus and Pixie.js and so on, that you can also take a look at. They've got other game examples here that you can kind of take the idea from, but not the code. All right, so if you're going to use any code from the web, for whatever reason, you want to use code from the web, please check with me first, because that way if it's okay, if I say it's okay, then you're good, right? I've told you it's okay to do it. But if it's not okay, then, and if you use it, then it's bad. It's like cheating, right? Yeah. Sorry, but all these links, by the way, don't worry about the link. The links are all up on eCentennial for you, or whatever it's called. Okay, I put them all up there. You don't have to search for them. The other one that I like a lot is tiled. Sometimes we make games, but the games we make are in kind of this 3/4 down orthographic kind of view. Looks almost like false 3D or faux 3D, and you can use tiles or a tile generator to do that. Right? You can make tile maps. You can also do things like maps and so on. And this is a free resource you can download. Actually, tiled is the de facto standard right now for creating maps, tile maps, right? So if you want to learn something, there's tons and tons of tutorials out there on how to use tiled and how to import the tile maps into your games, right? So I won't be covering everything here, but at least you have a resource for you to create these interesting tile maps, especially if you're going to make something like a platformer. Anyone else not sign in? Let's pass that down as well. All right. So tiled is definitely something we could look into as a resource. I'm just giving you resources here. The other thing is that we're going to be covering later on in the course kind of physics for JavaScript, right? And if you notice, you can actually have a physics engine, Box2D. I'll be warning you though, Box2D is fairly, I would say, poorly documented, right? But the great thing is we'll be covering some of this so you understand how it works, right? And how you can incorporate it into your game. So Box2D and it's called Box2D Web is what we're looking at. And again, I've given you this link. And what it was is the port, the Box2D Flash port for JavaScript, right? So it used to be made for Flash, but now they have something for JavaScript, and we're going to be using this as well later on. So that's another link that I've given you. Open Game Art. This is someplace that I definitely encourage you to grab some of your stuff. If you're going to grab assets, I don't expect any of you to be artists in the course, right? Because you guys are in the software engineering program, most likely, right? Software engineering. Is anyone in the actual game development program, the interactive game program? That's fantastic, right? It's gonna be fun. So, so because you guys aren't, right, and you may not be artists, you can grab a lot of your assets here. It's kind of like, I'm not going to say open source, but it's free to use, and as long as you give the rights to the person who, or kind of give props, if you will, to the person who created the art, you're perfectly welcome to do so, to use this stuff. Again, it includes things like sound assets, explosions, sprite sheets, all kinds of stuff. So instead of you having to search for it here, there's a lot of people who just kind of come up here to make it so to be used in the community, right? So opengameart.org is the place to go for that. Sometimes you need tutorials, and one of the guys that I like following a lot is, and this is one of the guys, one of the authors at lynda.com. His name is Lee Brimlow, and he actually has some really interesting stuff about JavaScript physics with Box2D. So he talks about how to create that. And there's some other tutorials here that you can watch. He's actually very, very good with HTML5. And I like the way he does his state machines and so on. So someone definitely to look at. GoToAndLearn.com would be something that you want to take a look at as well. When we get down to it, we'll talk about these different game frameworks. One of them, of course, we talked about was Easel.js, which is the one we're going to be using, right? Because remember, just like last time, I said Easel.js or Create.js. So again, Create.js is made up of 4 different suites of, or it's a suite of 4 different libraries, right? One of them is called Easel.js. We talked about that last time. Then there's Tween, Sound, and Preload. I'm going to try and put up another little template for you and fix one of the problems we had last week. I'll discuss that, on how to do that. But this is the main one we're going to be using. But what if, you put up your hand and say, Tom, I really don't want to use this one. I want to use Phaser, right? Because that's why I really like that, right? And I'll just go to phaser.io here for a second so you can see what I'm talking about. Phaser is another kind of competing HTML5 game framework. I like it. I think it's great. It's a little bit more advanced than Create.js though. So if you're not great at JavaScript, Phaser's not for you, right? It's something that you need to know a little bit more about when you get into. However, it's packed full of stuff that you can use, right? I'm talking about to create mobile games, even mobile applications. Phaser is really, really cool. It's there. Will I cover it? No. But I'm telling you about it. So just in case you want to use something else, if you're ambitious, you want to challenge yourself, then Phaser might be for you. And there's others. There's a bunch of other frameworks, and I've given you a bunch of frameworks out there that you can take a look at your own leisure. Here's one we will use this semester. It's called Litera, right? And what Litera does, it's called quasars.com, Litera. We want to sometimes create more interesting text than our regular text, and what this allows us to do is kind of create our own custom bitmap font as opposed to the standard fonts that we use, from the system. System fonts are pretty darn ugly, right? So this allows us to kind of load up your favorite font, put it in here, and this is what I did when I created some of the games that we made a couple semesters ago and last semester. So again, Litera is a place we can get our stuff when it comes to bitmap fonts. Okay, cool. The other thing is sometimes we need to resize, convert, or change our images, and there's this place called imagesplitter.net that allows you to upload images, split them up, resize them, do all kinds of stuff. And again, it's free and online, and it processes all the images for you. Again, don't worry about copying all these things down. I've already got them up on eCentennial, so you don't have to kind of worry about copying the links. Okay, so you have them already, right? And so that's one place to look at. Shoebox is kind of an open source software that allows you to do some of the same ideas, or cut and paste sprite sheets, create little animations, all kinds of little things. Again, free, open source. It's cross-platform because it uses Adobe Air. So that's something that would work for you as well. So I'm just mentioning some of these resources just so you know what they're around. We're also going to cover a bit of particle physics later on, and one of the things I like to look at, as long as these guys stay alive anyway, Purple Monkey Studios creates these particle effects, if you will. Right now the emission rate here is 1. Let's make it 200. And as you can see, right, it creates more of a smoke-like effect, right? And especially the emitter type, it's an emit, or I can do one shot, right? So it kind of creates that different kinds of effects for smoke. I can also change the colors and so on. And what it does is it generates the JavaScript right here for you, right? As opposed to you having to figure this out, and use something called Particle Emitter JS, which we'll be covering later on. Okay, Purple Monkey Studios. Okay, sometimes we also need textures, and even though I do 3D stuff, as an example, like I do also COMP397, which is a kind of a we talk about games and we use Blender. If you go to cgtextures.com, sometimes you want to put an interesting texture on the back of your game, like for example bricks. You can get some of these textures online. And again, a lot of them are free that you can use. You don't have to make them on your own, and especially when you want to get stuff that is repeating, something that's almost like a tile pattern that kind of bricks together, you can do that. And there's tons of them on here if you want to take a look at your leisure. Lots of fun here if you're interested in textures and texture mapping. Just want to cover as much as I can here before I move on. The other thing I'd like to talk about is some tools I use. One of the ones I really enjoy, and I'll talk about it a lot, is sometimes to create some of my screens and stuff is Blender, right? And Blender is an open source 3D tool. Let me just turn the lights down so you can see what I'm talking about here. Now I don't have enough time. I don't have enough time to talk about Blender here in this course and to teach you guys this as well. It's just not enough time. You know, we only have 14 weeks together. But basically what this allows you to do, this Blender tool, allows you to create objects in 3D space, right, and model them, you know, as an example. So you can create different kinds of objects, like for example, if you want to create your buildings in a city. And the thing is with these things, you know, the kind of the stuff we want to do, right, is we want to do create not just the buildings, but the you know, you can make a scene, right? So you can capture the image the way it is with lights and everything else. You're making a 2D game, but there's nothing to say that you can create your own like opening scene, a cut scene, or whatever that you take a snapshot of for your own game. To illustrate that, and this is called Blender. You can get it from the Blender Foundation, free. It's a free software. So again, if I go to blender.org, right, you can download Blender for free. And if you're interested, there's tons and tons of tutorials on how to use Blender to create your artwork, if you will. If you're interested in doing that kind of stuff, if you're an artistic type. If you're not, it's okay. But one of the things I did, I'm just going to go here and delete it, is when I created my Starbase 12 game, which is one of the games I created a couple of semesters ago. One of the things, it's deployed by the way on Heroku. This scene, right, is I made this scene in Blender, right, and all I did was import the meshes from my Starbase and my enemy ship and my ship, and when I started, it's just an image, right? So I'm not actually doing things in 3D, but I created this scene, right? It's almost like an opening scene, if you will. Again, the font I got as a bitmap font that I used Litera for, so I created this bitmap font, right? And then when I started with instructions and everything else, right, this whole background and everything, I created. Now, if you notice, the ship design is almost identical, right? So when you're doing ship design or whatever, right, with particle effects and so on. We'll go into more of that later. But the idea here is that what we want to try and do is make interesting stuff together, right? And we need some tools to do that. The other thing I use a lot is, I'll show you another little tool that I use. Get rid of this for a second. And I recommend if we're going to be in this course together for the whole semester, it's a $50 tool. I recommend you buy it if we're going to do things together. It's called Texture Packer. Texture Packer, what it does is it creates your sprite sheets. And it does them for different things. It's not just for Easel.js. It also does things for Cocos 2D, Unity, if you're going to be into Unity, SpriteKit, if you're going to program for iOS with Swift, and so on. There's tons and tons of other ones here that it works for as well. Of course, it's telling me, hey, I got an update, of course. Let's just not do that right now. But anyways, the good thing about Texture Packer, again, it's not that expensive. It's about 50 bucks. You can also download and install a trial, but don't do it now, because if you do it, it only lasts for a few days. And you want to use this when you need to use it, as opposed to right now when we're not going to get to that yet, right? So I use Texture Packer a lot, and we'll be using it towards the middle of the course when it comes to creating our sprite sheets, right? So we'll talk about that as we move forward. I recommend it. It's a good piece of software, and it's good for Mac and Windows. All right, so some tools we talked about here. And again, we also need some basic other tools. For example, I use a lot of Adobe products. Well, you can use whatever photo manipulation software you like. I like Fireworks. It's an Adobe CS6 product. It's pretty simple. It's not as complex as Photoshop, right? And it was originally made for the web. Unfortunately, Adobe has discontinued it for Adobe CC. However, they do support it for now with the old version of Adobe CS6, which is the previous version. It's totally fine. Eventually, as we go through the course, and again, maybe not this semester, but in the following semesters, I'll probably move away from Adobe CS6 and move into something like an Illustrator or Photoshop. It's more challenging to use Photoshop and Illustrator than this one, and that's why I've tried to steer clear of it, only because there's so many tools you can learn. Now, all these tools that I'm showing you, you're going to need something when you create your games. You can't just create games from space, like blow and all of a sudden the game is made. You got to get some stuff together. I don't expect you, any of you, to be artists, just to make that clear one more time. I don't expect you. You can get any kind of game art you want from online. We're not selling anything here, so it's okay. Anyone not sign in? If you can pass this down, please. And if, by the way, if your name's not on the list, just put yourself on the back, and then what I'll do is I'll add it to the list later on. So again, we need some tools in order for us to do our work, and we're going to be using this one today. I'll show you how this one works. But any one of these, any software manipulation program will do for you, as long whatever you're used to using, and it's just a matter of kind of using whatever we need to make things go. Okay. Now, as you saw, I'm using a Mac, but you don't need to use a Mac. I'm virtualizing a PC. We're going to be using Visual Studio 2013. I asked you guys last time to bring your own laptop. I think it's a good idea. However, if you don't have a laptop, you don't want to use a laptop, you want to use school resources, that's perfectly fine as well. It just means that when we're here in this room, you got to make sure you have Visual Studio 2013 with Update 4 and Visual Studio Web Essentials for 2013. If you don't have those two things in, then the stuff you might see up here is going to be different than what you see over there. I don't want to confuse you, but that's what may happen, and your view might be slightly different than mine, but it's okay. Don't worry about it. You can always follow the video and install your stuff at home or another computer. You can also use something called Teamviewer, which is something I recommend. It's not for commercial use. You're using it for yourself, and I'll show you where it is. Teamviewer.com is where I would go. Teamviewer is a remote control software that you can use to remotely control your computer from home, right? So you set it up on your machine at home. It works on both Mac, PC, and Linux, I think. There's different versions. If I was going to go to download, and of course I'm downloading it. I didn't want that. I mean download. They have different versions, different platforms, as well as mobile. You can actually remotely control your machine from your device, your mobile device as well. So Teamviewer might be the way to go for you. And there's nothing wrong with it, with using some kind of remote control software. I have had different students do it in the past where they have a machine at home and they want to follow along. They don't. The machine in front at school is not quite customized. You don't want to keep on downloading and installing stuff at school. Sometimes they wipe it away. But you don't have a laptop. And what's the solution? Teamviewer. For most of the applications we're going to be doing, you can set up Visual Studio. You can set up your environment, remotely control your computer from school. It will totally work. And the only thing you'll get, again, like we talked about, is a little bit of latency. Because if you do any kind of graphics or special effects, it'll appear a little bit slower when you're controlling it from here to home. It depends on also your bandwidth speed, how fast your stuff works at home compared to here. So any questions around that stuff? Just a bit of tools I wanted to give you. And we're going to talk about other ones as we move forward. But I really wanted to talk about tools because I think you can't do stuff without them. Oh, wait, there's one more I got to show you, which I've been using since around 2011. It's called Reiner's tilesets.de. It's actually a German site. This guy, Reiner, what he does is he creates free-to-use graphics, for example, for 2D. And he does things like 2D animals, right? And again, if you notice, this is like 3/4 down view. So if you're making a tile-based game or something like that, then this is good. He kind of creates his own assets for medieval-style RPG games, those kind of things. You can certainly download stuff from here. The other thing that I like to do is when we create games, we don't want to create them from a vacuum, right? We want to kind of create games with a plan. I kind of talked about that a little bit last time, I think. But let's talk about it again. And one of the places you can get stuff from to test things from is a place called this MAMEdev.org, where you can download something called this MAME, or Multiple Arcade Machine Emulator, right? And when I created my Starbase 12, that's the game I showed you earlier, right? By the way, like I said, all the code is online, like we said last time. I mean, I have to model it from somewhere. And if you go here, you can actually download this emulator. And then, of course, you can find the ROMs for original games. Let's see if I can kick this off for you guys as an example, right? So I have MAME installed here on my Mac. And MAME has different games. I've downloaded these different ROMs, like, for example, Gauntlet. Right, let's talk about this. This is an older game from the 80s, right? For 2D, right? Right? And the great thing about this is, what you want to try and do is you can start off. This is a game with multiple players and so on, warrior and so on. And what you do, it is an old top-down kind of game that you can use to kind of look and see what this old style game used to be like, right? Now, right there it is.
Oh no!
Right, a lot of ghosts over there. Right. But the idea here, when you're playing these games, right, is that it gives you an idea of what kind of games you can create, right, here in this course, right? Right. So again, sometimes we can't create things from a vacuum, and what we want to do is, I know it's crazy, eh? And what we want to do is create this a game that maybe we've seen before somewhere else. And again, this isn't a good example of tile maps, right?
Ow!
Right?
Ouch!
Hey man, I gotta fight. This is the warrior. Right, get some food. Right? Get this generator here, right? The idea here is that, what we want to do, oh no. If you ever go by these things, they kills you, right? Oh yeah, avoid fortune. But if you notice, these are classic games that can be played. You can emulate these things on your machine. And one of the ones I used, of course, for my game is Star Trek, right? Let's see if I can actually kick this thing off without doing stuff. This is the Star Trek game that you guys may have seen.
Welcome aboard, Captain.
Look familiar? Right? that. Right? Does it look familiar when I give it Starbase 12? I took it from this game. Right? 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 Just a weird thing that came up.
Sector 1.2.
Now you're watching me play the game. But the reason why I'm showing you is not because I like to play the game. It's because when I create games, so you see that game, right? And when I made Starbase 12, I said I want to make kind of a game like this other game, this Star Trek game, right? But what I want to do is make it my own. So I've got the same idea, this Starbase defense game idea, right? From there, I've taken it and I said, okay, I want to create a game from there. How do I do that? And my game isn't like that game, obviously. If you notice, by the way, I'm running 60 frames per second approximately on the right-hand side. I'll show you how to do that too. And I use more of modern stuff, but the idea is the same. You've got your guy, you know, your Klingon. He's attacking the Starbase, and I want to attack him.
Sector 0.2.
So the idea is the same. First, you got to have your kind of something to model from, and then it might be giving you an idea of what to do. And remember, one of the challenges that we have as you know, people, we love to bite off more than we can chew. We're like, oh yeah, I can do that. Not possible. Why? You only have 14 weeks, guys. There's not a lot of time. One of the projects you'll be getting is a team project, which we'll be talking about soon. And just get some water. When you get your team project, you only have about 5 weeks to create your own game. Some people are really ambitious and then they can't get it done. There's a lot of people in the class, right? So you partner with somebody, and I want to talk about partnering for a second because partnering is always tricky. I say that because sometimes you get someone like who's a real dog, right? I'm just put it out there, right? I'm going to be honest with you guys, right, and say it the way it is, right? You get a dog, and he or she doesn't work. You know, it's almost like the one person is like the slave, right? And there's a person behind who just like whips the slave to do the work, right? We don't want that kind of thing here. I want you to partner with people that you know are going to work. I'd rather you not partner at all, right? If you don't trust anybody that's going to do the same kind of level of work as you, right? So, and the reason for that is because it actually takes more time for development if you're partnering with someone you don't know how to work with, or you don't like to work with, or just doesn't work, right? So please, please pick a partner from now for your final project, because there's going to be a project that's going to be worth about 40% of your final mark. 30% is going to be the project itself. 10% is going to be the presentation. I'm telling you this date, kind of day 2 when we met. And the reason for what I'm telling you is plan. Don't try and do it the last minute. I know it's going to come to crunch time, which is week 14 of this course, where everything else is due all at the same time. It's going to happen to you. Please don't start late. When I give you your work, start it the day that I give it to you. All right? I know it's hard. I know that you have other distractions, like, if you're a party guy, right, like Lee over here, right, who just goes out all the time, right, and now I'm recording you on YouTube, right, so that's it, you're incriminated, right, and that's it. If you're one of those kind of people, or you have distractions, you have work, whatever, family to do, I know there's distractions, but I really urge you to start as soon as I give you the work. All right, so we talked about a couple things in this video. We talked about some tools for you. We give you a plan of what we're going to be doing. We're going to be talking about JavaScript in the second part after this. And then I'm going to do another little template for you guys to get you closer to understanding how to use the tools from Create.js. Any questions before we stop this video? And that's okay if you do have questions. It's totally cool.